right, so let's set some context. So today is a fireside chat with Jeremy. And am I pronouncing your surname correctly? It's
Yeah.
So
Xiao.
Yao. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Xiao.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll let you do an introduction as well. But you're from Gomu, and I'm sure you'll tell us all about Gomu as well. Before we jump right into it, yes, for everyone who is attending the session or will be watching as recording, the recording will be distributed publicly through the Twitter channels, as well as through the Scalene Academy student cohorts as well. So yeah, we should all be able to see from there. The plan for today, I think we'll keep it quite simple. It'll just be a casual chat around your journey and your thoughts on next steps and what's ahead. Any alpha recommendations or areas to focus on, all things crypto, I think will all be appreciated. So that's probably on the agenda. We'll keep it short, quick, and light and easy. But we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. So to kick things off, I might just give you some time. Just do you want to just give a quick introduction about your journey? How did your Web3 journey begin, and where did that take you, and how did that take you to where you currently are now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I got bitten by the crypto bug. First in kind of 15, 16, kind of just, that was like pure speculation. Bitcoin as an asset, it's the run from 100 to 1,000 and back down to like $80 again, that whole anti-Cox era thing. But that was just a speculative thing. I think the thing that really got my kind of brain engaged and kind of the wheels turning was the ETH popularity. I wouldn't say I was around for the ICO. I would love to have been around for the ICO, but I think when ETH was gaining popularity, I think the idea that we need immutable data on chain really kind of resonated with me. More because I didn't see the purpose, I guess as a person from a developed country, Singapore, right? Like, I didn't see the purpose. Like, money seemed fine, right? But I think compute seemed like, I could think of many reasons why you would want immutable compute. And I think that kind of resonated. And so actually in late 2016, early 2017 was when I left my kind of Web2 job, which was a product manager or senior product manager in Zendesk, where I was actually managing one of their core products called Zendesk Message. It's like it used to be one of their core products, but actually got sunsetted after I left. And so I left that full-time job and went all into Web3. I started by running an angel network, actually called Chainlock, where we did quite a few interesting ICOs. I think our biggest win is Kadena and Phantom. So we were Phantom pre-ICO. That was our biggest win. But I think that was just something that we did. I did kind of to find my footing in the space. I think after that, I went on to run an actual hedge fund on the tech side for a little bit, which got acquired by CoinMarketCap, where I became the VP of product. So going back into product, but actually even in the hedge fund, it was more about kind of the translation of the traders' requirements into tech, right? So it's a bit more on the product side already. But truthfully, re-entered product earnestly as VP of product in CoinMarketCap, where I helped them kind of like scale their product team. They had like no product processors, so scaled the whole team, built out, hired product managers, designers, project managers, that kind of thing. And kind of saw that all the way through to acquisition by Binance, and then after Binance worked there a while, left and joined Chainlink, the decentralized Oracle, where once again I find myself in a situation where I am the most senior product manager, and I started building out the team and some of the processes. When I left, the team was still quite small, but they used some of the processes that I put in place to kind of scale it out. I think they have, the last I heard from my friend, quote unquote, a lot of product managers now. I don't know how many is a lot, but a lot apparently. When back then there was only me. So That's kind of my journey, and then eventually I started, co-founded the company Gomu. So just to share a bit more about Gomu, because I think that's the obvious kind of next step, right? Is Gomu started as a kind of NFT or Web3 infrastructure company. So it's like Web 2.5, if you will, to bridge that gap. But actually, we've pivoted a few times, and actually Gomu is now the major core contributor of a protocol called collection.xyz, which is actually kind of conceptualized by the employees in Gomu. But we're not the only guys. There are like this one other guy contributing at the moment. So we're pretty much the contributors of it. But yeah, so I think now we kind of identify more as like collection.xyz. So collection.xyz is an NFT AMM, an automated market maker. I don't know if there's interest, we can go into that later. We launched about 3 weeks ago. We have about 800K in TVL and about 500, 600K in volume since then. So pretty decent for the bear market, I guess. But obviously everything can be better. We're trying to figure out how we can, 10x those numbers or something like that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that was a lot in terms of your journey from how you began as well, from Zendesk all the way to Gomu. I'm personally quite interested as well. So you're saying you were a product manager at Zendesk, then you went into the angel, the investing side. What did you study back in uni? As well? How did you transition from that to the product manager side? I'm genuinely curious, and I'm sure all of the students watching as well will be as well, because it's an interesting journey, right? So.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in the idea that I don't really plan. Like I genuinely think, and I tell this to my guys all the time, that like I think one of the problems that youngsters, I talk as if I'm very old, but I'm not that old, but I had a couple of more years under my belt than most people that are looking at startups these days. But I care a lot less about where I'll be in like 10 years, but more if I'm making the kind of optimal decision as my next step. So to answer your question, I actually studied UX research as my academic degree. I became a risk manager outside of college. Like when I graduated college, I joined Morgan Stanley as a risk manager in their fixed income and derivative desk. And then I left to join startup, where I actually, the startup I joined got acquired by Zendesk actually. And in that startup, I actually worked as go-to-market. So actually nothing I do has any bearing. Like I think everything leads up to me kind of owning product eventually, right? Because I think a product manager wears many hats. But I think nothing I did really kind of is related to my degree, like even go-to-market, right? The only reason I became a go-to-market guy was because I effectively hustled my way into the company. I just walked up, like they didn't have an opening. Then I walked up, I started talking to the CEO, and then it was like, I don't have an opening, but you look like a hustler and we want you in the company. And then that's how I ended up joining.
Yeah. No. It's that's a really cool insight as well, right? Because especially nowadays where there's so many set uni paths where people study a certain field, they go down into the natural career progression, and then they climb that ladder. It's really interesting to hear your path around how you learned you learn a skill set, you worked in a different area, got another skill set, but then all of that builds you up to be and sets you up for that next role, right? And then it's fascinating to see you come to this point. I know we have a few other points here, but I also have one other question around product management. Product management is always an interesting topic, because it's such a core concept, but it touches so many areas. You mentioned you were a product manager for Zendesk and also at Chainlink. What would you say would be the biggest differences and commonalities as well? And then the third part would be, what is the core takeaway for future students nowadays to sort of focus on from a product management point of view, both in Web 2 and Web 3, from your perspective?
So I think there's a lot more similar than there are differences. But I think that the main differences are probably not that interesting. It's because like Zendesk is a listed company at that time. Now they got taken private again, but it's really in the fact that we have like public shareholders. We need to make sure that we're optimizing for the quarter, you know, that kind of thing. A lot of like big company planning. But my unique experience in Zendesk was actually starting a new product in Zendesk. So I came in through an acquisition, but then I actually left, quote unquote, left that product to start a new product in Zendesk. And that was actually a unique experience. So I don't think I have a typical kind of like enterprise product management, or maybe it's because I don't fit in the typical product manager kind of role that I managed to kind of start a new product in a kind of big company. But I would say that the biggest differences were really a lot more kind of structure, long-term planning, right? Like there's a lot of emphasis on like, oh, we need to know all these things so that we can tell all these other guys that you're going to do this thing. And like there's a lot of planning.
Yeah.
Too much planning. Whereas like even smaller companies, I would say Chainlink kind of qualifies as that, even though Chainlink is pretty big. But like in startups and just smaller, even CoinMarketCap, right? Like a lot of it is a lot less planning and a lot more iterating, right? I would say where especially I guess when you're trying to do something. So just as background, in Chainlink, my idea, or rather my role, was to launch new chains or to figure out ways to launch new chains faster, to bring the Oracle network to, let's say, Arbitrum, Optimism, right? Like, and, you know, cut that time down from previously taking, say, 6 weeks to 4 weeks, 2 weeks, eventually 1 week, or maybe 1 day, right? Like, or automated. So like, a lot of my kind of work there was in like iterating, trying new things, like putting something into quote unquote production, or at least the dev environment, and then figuring out whether or not that works, whether or not that makes things faster, right? So I think that same concept kind of carries over everywhere. Like even in Zendesk, you have to do that, but at kind of a much reduced level, because you end up having to just like plan, attempt to plan, right? There's a lot more, it's really a lot more planning. But then, yeah, in kind of the startups, even in Chainlink, it's all about iterating. I would say the bigger difference would be Web 2 to Web 3. So I think in Web 2, like as much as, you know, data is always a problem, like data is still very much more readily available than Web 3. I think Web 3, you know, I think it's just a very simple fact that a lot of Web 3 people run like Brave browser or ad blockers. And because of that, you're tracking those, right? It's just simple, something simple like that like I never ran into before Web 3, right? Like I never had that problem when I was in Zendesk. Like nobody was running ad blockers, and I could like everything was loading properly. I think like just simple things like that. But I think the other part of it is in understanding the paradigms of Web3, like, you know, transaction signing, how that might take a while. And like I think in kind of Web3, you have to think about your product a lot more, quote unquote, defensively as well. Like what happens if this fails, right? Like you cannot assume that everything works, because like if something doesn't work in Web 2, you go to your developers and say, why didn't that work, right? Like, but if something doesn't work in Web 3, more than often, maybe they didn't pay enough gas, or the chain is clogged, or whatever it is. So you need to plan a lot more for these failure scenarios. But that's like if you're building a pure kind of DApp Web 3 kind of thing, right? But other than that, it would be like, yeah, it's just like working with a different stack, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's always an interesting transition between the two, especially for the product management role as well. Speaking of product management, I'm sure for the listeners and the audience as well, there will be many students, hustlers as well. What would be some of your insights or advice to these young generation builders who are ready to take on the world, or even better yet, knowing your journey, if you were to go back in time and redo it, would there be any things that you would do differently, or advice you would that you've learned along the way that you'd want to pass on to this next generation?
I think product management is a very interesting career, in the sense that for the majority of your career, until you become a manager or product managers, right? You are a manager in the kind of loosest sense of the word. Like, you actually spend most of your time begging people to get things done for you, because you are in charge of everything, but you're not in charge of anybody, right? So it's like you're in charge of the stuff, but you're not in charge of the people making the stuff. So there's a lot of like communication and a lot of like people management that I think initially I got not say very, but like I got quite frustrated with, right? Like, oh, why can't everybody just agree that this is the correct thing to do, right? Like, I've already presented all my thoughts, right? Like, but I think kind of having the benefit of having experience under my belt, it's really in understanding that, hey, these are people making the product as well, right? So it's as much your job to show them that your product or the thing that you design or decided to build, or your PRD is objectively correct, as much as it is to convince them that they should invest their effort into building this, especially in a startup, right? Because in a startup, you are, or if you have a smaller company, you are really trying to convince somebody to invest their time and effort into your thing that you're trying to build, right? So like you cannot discount that that factor where you really have to convince them so that they are bought in, right? So that you can give them responsibility that you don't have to kind of micromanage, take away later.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely resonate as well. Just for context as well. So I'm outside of Scalene as well, I'm also involved in Deloitte in professional services as well. I could agree completely with the people management side, the team collaboration, communication. It is a big part of the process, and as we can see here, it's the same in Web3, and I guess that definitely is a key core area for the listeners here as well. That teamwork still is a core skill, especially when it comes to these projects as well. Cool. All right. So let's talk more about Gomu as well. I know you touched on it briefly earlier in terms of Gomu, and then now it's branched off into into collection XYZ. Yeah. Are you able to talk more about how you found product market fit for Gomu, and then also that transition to collection XYZ as well? Yeah.
So I mean, the caveat here is I think we found, I wouldn't say product market fit for Gomu, I would say we found a kind of a prototype fit, right? Because I think most of our customers for Gomu were really people making prototypes. I think that was the reason why we actually decided to move away from that, because I think while there's an abundance of prototype makers and hackers and all these things, or people in big companies, consultancies like Deloitte or whatever, experimenting with new ideas, NFTs and all these things in the bull market, when the bear market came, we were like, okay, great. Like, all these guys are literally telling us that they're shutting down the team or they're abandoning the project and stuff like that, right? And so we, as founders, we made a value judgment of like, do we want to kind of continue banging our head against this wall, or do we want to try and do something else, right? And I think we had a lot of conversations, and we kind of decided that we didn't want to do that, mainly because there are much better capitalized players entering the space at that point in time. So it was in the bull market, like Alchemy, like Infura, they were all kind of just like, oh, I need to provision more nodes, I need to build more infrastructure, go acquire this, acquire that. But I think in the bear market, all of them were like turning their gaze and saying like, hey, these guys are making shit tons of money. Excuse me. They were making a lot of margins providing this API, because they only run one node and they fan it out to like 100 API clients, right? And it's like, how do I get in on that? And then suddenly you start seeing like Alchemy and Infura announcing their API, NFT API beta, which was our kind of core product. And we're like, okay, like, I don't think we can fight the well-capitalized players here. So either we retreat into a smaller niche, which was what some of our, I think, cohort and kind of competitors did. They kind of backed away from that generic NFT API into like maybe order books or maybe off-chain data or something like that. And we decided that, you know what, we're not interested in that. We just wanted to go on full-on decentralized degen.
Yeah. Okay, I see. And then as time progressed, Gomu then transitioned into collection.xyz, which I've just had a quick look on the website as well. So it's yield on your NFT, so sort of like an AMM on the NFT market itself, right? Yeah,
it's like Uniswap for your AMMs, but like you can't use Uniswap because Uniswap is meant for like hundreds of thousands of tokens, where the constant product is like if you have two. To maintain constant product, if you have two NFTs inside a pool, if you sell one, the other one needs to go up by 100% to maintain constant product. That doesn't work, right? So it's basically a situation where you apply bonding costs. But the other thing about it is, and why we actually emphasize in our kind of material that we work with the whole collection, is that we actually restore non-fungibility. So the other thing about AMMs or even NFT AMMs is they kind of make everything fungible. So they make it so like your 10,000 CryptoPunks are all just 10,000 CryptoPunks. It doesn't matter if you have the rare one, the zombie one, they're just CryptoPunks. So what we do is we have this level of differentiation that is on-chain and composable that allows people to say like, I only want to trade against zombie punks because I'm a baller, right? And I don't want to trade the plat punks or something.
Yeah. Nice. No, it's really interesting, and I'm keen to see how this space evolves as well. I definitely am interested in to see that the collision of both the NFT and the DeFi space as well. So let's see. All right, so moving along. So now that we've seen. It's currently 2023. We're still sort of. I think we're getting at the point where we're right about to get out of the bear market.
Not financial advice.
That's what we all think. What are your and based off your history of what you've experienced, what you've seen, what's your view on what the future of blockchain Web3 holds in the near term, medium term, and the longer term?
Yeah, so I think near term, that's the thing that like no one knows, because like in the short run, it's like anyone's guess. It's like a voting system. Right? you can lose an election that you thought you're going to win, and vice versa. So I think in the near term, I don't know, right? Like, but I think personally, as somebody that's been building in the space, I think I'm pretty bullish because I see a lot of builders building in the space, and I think it is the kind of bear markets where you really see the people that are building and they're thinking about the blockchain for what it's worth, not like, oh, how can I make a ICO or a coin or an NFT collection that, like I just put 2 pixels or something like that, and somehow each one sells for 50 ETH or something like that, right? So I think it's during the bear markets that you really see stuff like that. And I think for me, as long as I see more and more talent and more people kind of coming and sticking around, right? That's to me the kind of better signal for the long-term trend, because like I think money goes where the kind of brain power goes, right? So like if all your brain power is going towards AI, that's where money eventually goes, right? And I think that's for blockchain, like of course bear market goes down, but like I think if you look at it, like the brain power is still flowing into the space. There are more and more people that become bitten by the blockchain bug and never leave than there are like people getting frustrated and kind of like capitulating and leaving blockchain. So I think for me, In the long run, it's still very bullish. But I think in the short run, I'm not too worried as a kind of long-term builder in the space.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. You touched on a really good point there, the talent topic, right? And of course, us at Scalene, I know we're sort of, we're building the education platform, and we're on a mission to empower and take students or people who are interested on that journey as well. From your view, is there anything else that is needed that would help builders in Web3 go from where we are to that next level?
Yeah, I mean, for now, obviously, it's still like more funding, right? Like, I think right now, funding itself has kind of like dried up a little bit. I mean, to be very, very honest. Like,
yeah.
In the short term, like funding, who knows? Like, but it looks a bit tough right now. But I think more funding in the sense that funding going towards people who are solving actual problems and not funding for the sake of like Ponzi-nomics or whatever it is, right? Like the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's not what we want. We want like people who look at it and then, or rather investors who are thoughtful about the space and say like, yeah, we are in this for the long term. And it's okay if like 2 of my portfolio companies die, because I'm still investing in another 17 more or something like that. Because I think what sometimes the bull market kind of results in is like you have these like maybe equity funds or maybe family offices like, oh wow, so much money in Web3, let's put some money there, and they put in like 2 crappy projects that die, and then like, oh, I never want to touch Web3 again or something like that, right? So I think that's one. But I think the other thing is that it's actually just more and more acceptance for kind of crypto and blockchain, right? Like I felt it when I joined startups like 10 plus years ago. You're giving away my age here, right? So when I joined startups 10 plus years ago, like, and I quit Morgan Stanley, my dad was like, "Are you serious? like you're leaving your high-paying Morgan Stanley risk analyst job for this startup that pays you less than half? Are you nuts?" Like there was an actual kind of like, I think you need to seek mental help kind of situation. I think there's a bit of that, right? Like I think a lot of even my guys here, they just tell their parents, "Oh, I work in tech," right? Like it's because like there's just so much explaining every time it's a blockchain. Like even I faced it myself. Like a couple of years ago, I was having a conversation with my uncle, and my uncle was like, "Oh, what do you do?" Right? So I said, "Oh, I do this like blockchain related thing." And said, "Oh, crypto." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I mean, I guess." Then after he turned to his daughters and said, "I don't want you to ever touch crypto. If you touch it, I'll disown you." I'm like, "Wow, okay, that's kind of crazy." But I think there's also like this. I guess what I'm getting to is like, it does affect some people. Maybe not me, but like, but it does affect some people and prevent them from getting into space because like, oh, if I get into blockchain, like what would my parents think, right? Or like what I studied for 6 years or something like that on a master's degree, like does it make sense that I get into blockchain if there's that stigma? Or like if maybe some employees will look at my resume and say like, "Hey, look, this guy was a scammer for 2 years."
Yeah, no, I understand completely. It really comes down to that perspective, and societal perspective on what Web3 builder carries as well, right? And that really needs to shift if we really want to bring everyone along to that next level. And then your other point as well around the funding. I find this is a really good point as well. Funding the right projects that solve challenges, as opposed to funding hype projects or the Ponzi projects, which is always, we all know how those end. So on that topic, are there any verticals or trends that you believe will have the most significant impact, or I guess or even focus areas on challenges that need to be solved from your view? I know that's sort of like 2 questions in one, but what's your view on that?
Yeah. So I think there's a difference between what verticals blockchain is interesting in or has application in versus what is hype, right? Kind of to your earlier point. So like, there are many guys, even in Singapore or maybe even in Australia, that are doing like interesting, like say real world tokenization projects and stuff like that. They have like $1-2 million tokenized on chain, you know, and they're slowly grinding it out. Is that a success or is that a failure, right? Like if you look at it from the hype funding point of view, like, oh, they didn't raise their $100 million, $500 million round, and hence it's a failure, right? But actually, they're still kind of like surviving. They're still kind of tokenizing more and more, slowly tokenizing more and more assets, you know. So is it? I don't know, right? Like, I think real world asset tokenization is always going to be a theme. The question is like, I don't think like just based on the fact that I've been around through like 4 cycles now, like it's always like this like 3rd place, 4th place kind of theme where somebody goes, oh yeah, real world tokenization, right? You know, like asset RWA tokenization, right? Real world asset tokenization.
Yeah.
And like, but because the real world has a lot of like legal paperwork that needs to be done, and so these things are not hyper scaling. These things are not suddenly, you know, $5 billion come on chain, and like if you can't tell that story, you're not getting $1 bajillion in funding. It's not exciting, but it is a big kind of theme that I think you know will always dominate, right? The same with like a bit like DAOs, right? Every cycle, the first Ethereum kind of hack was effectively a DAO hack, right? And like that caused the Ethereum Classic split. But
yeah,
every cycle there's DAO, and every cycle DAO kind of gets a bit better, a bit more important, and that's one of those things where, yeah, you know, like it's one of those important things. I feel like on-chain governance, on-chain DAOs are one of those important pieces that are always going to be there, but I just don't know how you're going to build $1 billion company. I'm probably wrong. There is going to be $1 billion DAO, but you know, at least as of this point, I can't figure out how, right? And so like, there are these interesting things that are always worth focusing on, right? If you're not here to like chase a trend, or you're just here to build, and I think everybody can build viable businesses. Not everybody, but like definitely viable businesses can be built. I think one kind of running thought that I've had of being exposed to in kind of the multiple bear markets that I've been through is the thing that most people think is unimportant when they first entered crypto, or like was of like tangential importance when they first entered crypto, is actually the most important thing. So what do I mean? Like decentralization. So a lot of people come into crypto and say, oh yeah, you know, maybe we need a compromise, and all these projects preaching a compromise always take off. But I think ultimately it's shown time and time again that when the bear market comes around, it is the fully decentralized, you know, like I embrace decentralization, I embrace composability, I embrace everything on chain that actually survive, right? Because they are the ones that are true to the Web3 kind of blockchain ethos, and are the ones that are funded by the serious investors in the space. So it's like, I think a lot of people think about like, I just remember this in 2016, 17, I was talking to a project and they said, oh, I want to build, you know, like, what is big WhatsApp? And so I should build like Ethereum WhatsApp. Every cycle there's like an Ethereum Messenger, Ethereum WhatsApp, or whatever it is, right? But like, I think it is the sheer fact that it cannot be fully on-chain that prevents its success, because ultimately they were like, oh, I will make XYZ compromise to make this product a reality. But it is these compromises that people don't like, and like when the bear market comes, if you have these compromises, you don't get the funding, right? It's just, I don't know. This is just a pattern that I've kind of noticed in a couple of years of kind of building in the space, basically.
Yeah. No, that's really strong advice, and that goes directly to the future builders that are listening in as well, and or we're watching the recording as well, right? So it sounds like what you're saying here is go all the way, just go all the way through, because the trend that you've seen is sometimes the compromise, especially for the builders when they're figuring out the architecture. Yeah, the compromise always. I agree as well. That's always come up as well when we're planning. But it sounds like, if you're in the Web3 space, just go all Web3.
I think it depends, right? So like if your core protocol is an AMM, then sure, your chat can be like maybe a Whisper protocol, something like semi-decentralized. But if your core protocol is the chat, then you shouldn't use Whisper, something like that, right? So I think it depends on what's your core, and the core is what you shouldn't compromise. But I think that is the part of the beauty of like, or the art of product management in Web3, which is like, okay, what do I stick to this fully decentralized ethos, and what can I, compromise with maybe semi off-chain or like some kind of semi-hosted solution or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. No, that was a really insightful session. I think we might move on to some Q&A. I think we have 2 questions here. One from James. So I think you may have touched on this already earlier on, but how did you find conviction in the Web3 space? I know you had that jump right between Zendesk to outside, but what was that moment where you realized, yes, all in?
I mean, I would be lying to say that the asset price going up didn't contribute to part of the conviction. But I think very honestly, these days I think I check like asset prices like once a day, which is quite little for people. I check my equities portfolio once a day too. So to be fair, I'm just that type of guy that just like look at everything once a day, right? Kind of thing. But I think truly, like, I think the conviction comes when I start understanding that the developed world, like Singapore, Australia, or whatever, US, is not the only market in the world, right? So personally, I can tell a quick story where I ran into some banking problems where the bank, so I had a company operating that received some payments from a blockchain company. That's something that had blockchain in the word. I was doing consultancy, kind of advisory at the point in time. Some company with some word blockchain in the word, I think, paid me some money, and they froze that account. Okay, it's a private limited. They froze the account. Fine. They say it's money laundering. And then a couple of I didn't check the account because I don't really need that particular small amount of money there. Yeah. They froze for a small amount of money, like I don't know, like $1,000 or something like that. Froze my personal bank account. And then even though it's a private limited, which is supposed to be like taking on all the liabilities and stuff, and the reason they gave me was that because I was a director of the company. And so I've received payment, and hence if that company is money laundering, then I too am susceptible to like money laundering. And I just thought it was so BS, right? Like I think that was like the one thing that gave me a sense of it, and then like gave me a taste of like, wow, like if I'm facing this problem in like a first world country where there's the rule of law and banks are supposed to be this thing, and I have a private limited and I have all this infrastructure in place, and I still can have this problem, like, well, let alone if you're in a country that has maybe a warlord that's running a banking infrastructure, or like like you're trusting the provision shop to do remittance, right? Like these guys probably just say like, oh, I don't recognize you, cut your hair, Kevin. Like, I'm gonna, it's like, you don't get the money. Sorry, wait till your hair grows back. Right. So like, I'm sure it's worse, right? So like to me, like I think that reminder kind of gives me conviction to continue kind of growing the space. But of course, like I'm dealing in like, I don't know, $10,000 JPEGs, right? Like it's very different from this remittance problem. But I think everything kind of adds, right? So like we need the developed nations to come in and kind of like be part of the scene first, and then that will expand outward as more and more companies invest in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. Another question from the audience. This one's more finance related. Great take on the state of the funding for Web3. as builders and maybe founders in the future, how do we identify the right angels or funds to seek funding from?
Yeah, angel round, angel seed, to me is just about how you vibe with the investor, right? Like, it's great if you can get a big name, somebody to help you push your branding in your next round. But honestly, angel is like, if you look at the traditional and the name kind of suggests, the guy is supposed to be like your angel who gives you this money to focus on this idea. And so like the ultimate most important thing for an angel round is like, does the investor vibe with you? Right? And does the investor allow you to make the best possible, what you think is the best possible choices? So we've been pretty lucky, and also because I guess we are serial entrepreneurs effectively, multiple exits and stuff like that, they say like, you know what, okay, you know better than I do, so if you want to pivot, you pivot, right? So I think, but I think angel rounds are all about finding the fit. I think in terms of funds, I think doing a bit of due diligence and asking around is pretty much your best bet, because I don't understand the Australian funding landscape. And so like, if you tell me there's this fund that wants to invest, I'm like, I don't know, ask a couple of friends, right? But I think, get a couple of like portfolio, like if you're in a position to, right, obviously just say like, okay, maybe can you connect me with XYZ company? Like sometimes you can ask for it as like a partnership or a referral situation where you say like, this guy in your portfolio pretty interesting, I feel I can learn a lot from him, like can you connect me? And like if they can connect you and that guy is willing to like take a call because for the investor ask them to, right, and then you have some idea that the investor is probably a pretty decent.
No, that's really good view as well. Just on that fundraising, another question was asked here as well. How did Gomu raise? Essentially, maybe walk us through Gomu's fundraising journey.
Yeah, I think that atypical, I think would be the word that I would use. Yeah. To begin with, very honestly, Gomu raised kind of at the tail end of the bull market. So we had it lucky in terms of the timing.
Nice.
But I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that the co-founders are all serial entrepreneurs. So 3 of us have had multiple exits. So like myself, the startup that I joined actually became the first acquisition in Singapore to be done by a Silicon Valley company, which was Zendesk. So I joined Zendesk as a result of the acquisition. And then technically the hedge fund that we were operating was actually acqui-hired by CoinMarketCap. And the reason for that, I promise you, is not that dumb, is that if you think about a hedge fund, pricing is very important, right? Like to understand the price of assets and track all these things in a very performant, very accurate manner is the core of the hedge fund. And I think CoinMarketCap wanted to replace the technology with something a bit stronger. And so that's where we were actually acqui-hired and brought in. And then we got acquired by Binance, right? So like, I think having that kind of story lends itself to easier fundraising life, right? So to be very honest, there was a bit of tail on the bull market, serial entrepreneur. But I think, that's kind of our fundraising story, not very relatable, but I think the what most companies will kind of run into is the fact that when you're doing like especially an angel round pitch, the idea is always viable. Like think about it. Like, have you ever spoken to somebody like if the idea is not viable, it would have been weeded out by hopefully by their friends and family in initial conversations. Like if I said, you know what, I want to start a boutique TV manufacturing businesses by assembling TV in my living room at home. I don't know, right? Like, and you would tell me that sounds like a dumb idea. I don't think you're getting funding for that. So like most ideas, by the time it gets to the point where somebody is seriously raising money, it's kind of validated, probably not illogical, right? So actually, I find that because I do a bunch of angel investments as well, a lot of times the founders that I back spend more time talking about why they want to start the company, like what did they experience, like what has brought them to today, that they kind of want to start this company that's in healthcare or health tech or whatever it is, or blockchain. Why your team? Why you? Why your team? Kind of situation.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying there as well, and no, it's fascinating to see how Gomu raised as well. But no, it's impressive how it all comes together. All right, so just in the interest of time, I know we have a few questions in the Q&A. I think we might just do one, and we'll just keep this one light and easy. I think there was a question here around. Okay, yeah. So this one's pretty cool. So, how important is it in Web3 to find a group of like-minded people in your community? And the example here is, right, everyone in my personal circle is in corporate. Maybe I don't know as many people in the Web3 space. What's your take on that one?
Yeah, I think it's actually very important in the sense that, like, as an individual, it will kind of drive you nuts if you are the only sole believer in something, right? Like, but then don't get me wrong, right? That's how, like, fortunes are made, right? Like, holding a contrarian opinion that essentially is proven right is kind of how fortunes are made. Right? I bet on Bitcoin when everybody said, "Oh, stupid." And not that I did, but I'm just saying that that's an example, right? Like, oh, I bet on this stock on Tesla when everybody said it was going bankrupt, and now I'm proven right, right? But, like, I think it will be literally driving somebody insane if, like, you are the only person that understood that value. You know, like, you need therapy, right? So, like, I go to NFT meetups in Singapore, like, you know, for a couple of times now, and like, when I go there, they say, like, oh, honestly, we hold this meetups because it's like therapy session, because, you know, like, everybody thinks we are crazy for spending $16,000 on a JPEG and an Azuki or whatever it is, right? Like, but the only reason there's conviction to hold an Azuki is because you know people who are also holding Azukis, right? And I think that's where, if you're really kind of convicted in the space, I'm not saying, like, you know, don't meet up with your friends, but I tend to not bother telling kind of my, say, secondary school friends or university friends about crypto all that much, unless they ask, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, all these things. But, like, I don't feel the need to evangelize things if once I've already tried. Like, if I've met the guy for the first time and, you know, they seem interested, of course I'm going to talk to them about crypto. But, like, if they don't seem interested, then I typically just don't talk to them about that, and I try to find circles of friends that do, right? So I do hang out a bit more with some people who I wouldn't have hung out with if they weren't crypto, right? So I think that's kind of like the way that I find that, like, a support group and network. And I think building is even more, right? Like, I think investing is one thing, like buying and holding. Sure, you know, we need retail therapy for buying a $16,000 Azuki or whatever it is. But I think if you're saying, like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and, like, go all in the building, I think that's where something, let's say, a community like Scalene or whatever it is, where there's literal supporting people that you can chat about to see, like, is this a good idea? Is this bad idea? Right? Like, that I think it becomes really valuable when you try to, like, stay in the space.
Yeah. No, that's a really, really good response, and I'm glad you talked about it in that specific way as well. I'm sure Kev and Andy have told you about it, but that was actually one of the core reasons why we started Scalene as well. Australia, Sydney, a few years back, there wasn't much of a community support network, and that's how the concept of Scalene was born. So to all the students and viewers, reach out to anyone in the Scalene community, reach out to us, and happy to just chat and help. And as you've said, Jeremy, we need that support network to so that, you know, as you say, we don't go crazy just by ourselves, right? Because environment is important. Environment shapes who you become and your limits and your thoughts as well. So resonate completely with that as well.
For sure.
Cool. All right. I think very conscious of time. I know we're a bit over. I'm just going to give a quick overview to the Scalene students, and then I think we may leave it there. So the core message to the students, of course, is that this pretty much wraps up our core learning components. So for those that haven't already, please complete your course components as well as review the assignment parts as well prior to next week. Moving ahead into next week, the focus will be around forming a team, and basically we'll be preparing to put together our capstone project, where teams will be formed, and they'll be identifying challenges to solve as we've touched on today, and all of this will be in preparation for the upcoming Glitch Hackathon as well. So the action for students, please monitor emails, ask questions, and we can go from there. All right. I think we may leave it here. I think this has been a really awesome session. So thank you so much for taking the time as well and sharing your insights. Always a pleasure to have you on, and definitely keen to hear more insights moving forward for both GoMu and collection.xyz. Thanks so much, Jeremy.
Pleasure. This was a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thanks so much. Have a good rest of the Friday, and yeah, I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you.
Real good. Thanks, Jeremy.